Okay, so it's the time and the parts and the stage of the show where we come to the expert interview. And I always get the responsibility, in fact, the pleasure and privilege of conducting the expert interviews. And many of the people that we interview on the show are very good friends of mine. And today's guest is no exception at all. We have Brian Coventry, who is with us today as our guest. And I could tell you who he is, and I could tell you what he does and where he's from, but I'm going to let him do that instead. So, Brian, welcome to the show, and who are you, and what do you do?
Thanks, Martin, for putting me on the spot. Well, I guess for those listening that know of me, over the years, many years in the UK, our business, Symphony APS, has been known for providing technology solutions for leading accounting practices in relation to, first of all, practice management. And then we moved into CRM, which then included all things around the system integration and automation requirements. And we've been working with firms over many years in those areas. At the beginning of this year, though, we launched another platform called CloudCapcha. As the word suggests, it's about the cloud, and this relates to change that we saw happening back in early 2016 through to 18 with Microsoft Teams, and how that was playing into the arena of new ways of delivering personal productivity solutions and collaboration platforms for individuals that worked in any business. And we could see how that was going to impact our clients and also our prospective clients. So CloudCapcha is a new approach to practice management, collaborating inside the heart of Microsoft Teams, in the cloud, fully SaaS. And that's what we've been spending a lot of time talking to our clients and also prospective clients around the world. So we're talking to firms in the US, UK, and Australia right at this moment in time. So it's quite exciting.
That sounds fantastic. Now, we talk technical a lot on this show, Brian, because our listenership is predominantly accounting practitioners. I'm going to go away from the technical into the intangible, shall we say. And given that you are cutting edge, given that you are working on cloud technology, and given that that must be a bit of a mind blower at times, what do you love most about what you do?
Personally, I get a lot of satisfaction out of getting involved in quite complicated scenarios for accounting firms, how to solve particular problems. And it's not necessarily always to do with technology. We developed a few years ago, as you know, a consulting platform called Envision that helps firms chart their roadmap in relation to a particular technology platform, and making sure that they get to the real nub of what's holding them back, and then charting the correct course forward with whatever technology they need to help them achieve that. So there's a lot of satisfaction that comes from, working with people in a very deep way, rather than just having the technology piece conversation. So we get involved in all things related to process and culture, and being able to communicate that in a way that they can understand and absorb and then do something with. I get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing firms really work hard on all aspects of change, so process, technology, culture, and seeing the outcome of that I've always found what's challenging, but the relationships that you get to form by taking that approach with firms, we have relationships that go back decades,
right.
because of the way they're so yeah. For me personally, I think that's always been a key focus of mine is trying to deliver that depth that these firms need.
Yeah, and in this first part of the interview, I'm sort of delving into you more than I'm delving into the business or perhaps your experience. But, on LinkedIn, I rail against these tropes or pithy sayings. Sometimes it's better to do this than to do that. Well, sometimes it's better to do everything than something else. So,
Mhm.
do you have a personal philosophy for success?
Yes, I do, and I think it's quite important that if you truly want to have long-term relationships in this sector, then the mantra that we hold across Symphony and also CloudCapcha is authenticity with, sorry, I've got that wrong. Everything with authenticity.
Everything with authenticity. Yeah. Okay.
Got it wrong, mate. And that's important. There's a lot of I see a lot of presentations that are done that tell people what they want to hear,
Yep.
but not necessarily followed through on. And I know that accounting firms get quite frustrated when they, when they're put in a situation where their expectations are set, and those expectations are not met, and that leads to disappointment in the short term. So for us, it's about being authentic in everything that we do, and sometimes that means actually fronting up to the client and say, look, I don't think this is the right thing for either of us.
Sure.
Okay. So, and we've had a couple of examples of that where, despite best endeavours on both sides of the fence, you could just see it wasn't going to work. So, for the sake of the relationship, it was really important to go back and say, look, I think we should take a different course here.
Okay.
And sometimes that means you've got to say goodbye, but that's really important. I think we should all be doing that in whatever we do.
Although it wouldn't be a differentiator if you did, that's for sure. But it's interesting that parting ways is actually the win-win in certain circumstances. That that interests me. So everything with authenticity is the philosophy for success. So if you base yourself in authenticity, has there been a thinker or a book or a movement that shaped your philosophy for life and for business?
Look, I've read not enough books. I think Gary Boomer, we had a lot from Boomer Consulting in the States. I know he's a real advocate of reading books. Your future will be shaped by the things that you're reading today. And I'm always quite critical of myself that I don't read enough. But I think more recently, probably the person that I've referred to a lot in, I spoke about the Envision methodology that we came up with. Simon Sinek's someone that I use a lot and reference, because whether you agree with his content or not, it's the way he shapes conversations and the way that he brings things into a higher level of context that makes it easier for people to understand. I've definitely been influenced by the way he does that and the way he communicates that and the things that he writes about.
Yeah.
And I believe him to be quite an authentic person in terms of the material that he has. So that'll be one that stands out for me.
It's kind of hard to argue with his golden circle methodology, and when you can describe a philosophy in 3 words, start with why.
Yeah.
That's about as succinct as it's going to get.
Yeah.
And it straight away makes you think, what is my why? Why am I doing this? So why takes us to beliefs. So here's one for you. Is there anything you believe deeply, or believe in deeply, do deeply, that other people think is crazy?
Well, our beliefs. Well, there's. Let me try and answer it this way. We have very strongly held values in our business, and there's a belief system in and amongst all those values that shape the way that we show up in order for us to be authentic in everything that we do. And so those are closely held belief systems within our business. So that's now I would hate to think that any of our clients or prospects would think that we're crazy for some of those values that we have.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'd be very surprised if they did that. But I think if there's one thing that I do personally that people think I'm crazy, is probably the long distance endurance swimming that I do in more recent years. So that's taking me to some interesting bodies of water. I've got to say there are swimmers out there that are more crazy than I am. I don't think it's crazy, but I do get that comment quite a lot. You're mad. Why do you do that? So yeah, that'd be one thing.
Well, I say that to you. You are mad, but you're also extremely good at what you do as well. So last question then on Brian, the individual then. A piece of career advice, the best piece of career advice you've ever been given? Anything come to mind?
Yes, I think there's been situations that I can recall. One in particular was way back in 1998. Together with Brian Armstrong, he and I formed APS in Australia and the UK. We were in quite a very comfortable executive role within a business called Solution 6. And we walked away, and we decided that there had to be a better way of servicing the leading accounting firms that we come to know in Australia and the UK. And the advice we were given at that time, I remember through one of our lawyers that was helping us with pulling the organisation together, was to, you never want to be in a situation where you stay where you are and then 10 years down the track, turn around and go, I wonder what would have happened if.
Yes.
And so, and that, I've always remembered that, where there's been similar situations that are in front of you. You've got choices to make, and it's always a good test to run across a decision as to say, well, in 10 years' time or 5 years' time, is it going to really nag the hell out of me if I turn around and go, I wonder what would have happened if?
Yes, absolutely.
That would be that I couldn't stand. So better to fail trying than succeed doing nothing.
Yes, I remember a musician. I'm trying to remember the name of the musician, but he said, I'd rather bomb with my own stuff than succeed with cover versions.
Yeah, there you go.
He didn't. He was very successful. As I remember, that was Eddie Van Halen. But so taking now the conversation from you to the listeners. Okay, our listeners are accounting practitioners of all shapes and sizes all around the world. So, what frustrates you most, if there is something that frustrates you most, about the accounting profession at large in general?
I would say that until recent times, because we deal with technology, you come up with solutions that you think will fly off the shelf.
Yes, and
you find that the process within firms isn't conducive to the decision making, and in the past, I think a lot of that's been anchored around the collegiate nature of the profession and the way that they go about making decisions as partnerships. So that would be one that always frustrated me a lot. Is that it? And that's a very selfish thing to say, because that's us. We've got something that we would like you to implement, that we would like you to buy, and you've then got this. You've just got this wait cycle for that decision. Now firms have changed and been changing over many years. You've seen a lot of the people that now are in key roles, executive roles around IT, have come from other industries. We were talking to one only a few weeks ago that came from retail, and I think that's been a real positive addition to firms who have got more, whether it's the right word or not, more corporate and organisational in the way they go about making decisions, and away from everything's made around the partners table, and that's been a positive.
Do you feel that some accountants, or indeed some accounting firms, have fallen short as a result of this decision by committee that you were talking about? As a stasis or a decision to not decide, we'll think about it. Well, my one of the phrases I hate the most: kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
For 6 months. In other words, do nothing. Do you think that some accountants or accounting firms have fallen short or been complacent over the years, and what's the cause of that, do you think?
I think where that process of decision making that you've just described, and one that is changing. What's happened as a result of that, of kicking the can down the alley, as you say, is we're putting off decisions that really should be made today for another time, tomorrow, next month, next year. And in the world of technology, what happens is very, very soon you accumulate technical debt.
Yes.
And at some point, that debt has to be repaid. And debt, as you know, accumulates interest.
Yes.
And so a decision to put something off is, we all know, if we keep borrowing more, we end up paying more interest. And when that day comes and you have to repay that debt, the change and the impact on the organisation can actually be very severe, because you have this manifestation of all number of things that have been left to tomorrow.
Yes, yeah,
that,
absolutely.
That I would say is a real problem for firms. And if it goes too long, then they just stand still and stagnate, and they're not able to then shift gear for the benefit of their organisation. Now, I will say one thing is that because of the pandemic, what we've seen is a lot of firms actually using the period of the pandemic is to try and attack some of the technical debt that they've had. And there was because the pandemic forced firms and their clients and their business partners to work in different ways, all of a sudden things had to be in a certain shape and substance in order for people to communicate and collaborate. And therefore, there's been quite a shift over the last 18 months. We've seen with firms that are really, really addressing any areas of technical debt to get their ship in order and in shape to look after themselves and their clients, because they all sort of realise we're not going back to the way we were working before. So we have to make these changes. And that's been really good. There's been some really, Microsoft Teams, which is a platform that, I spoke about before, has driven a lot of this. We know of one firm that in the November before the first lockdown happened, had a roadmap to roll out Microsoft Teams over a 6-month period in the 2020 year. It turns out that as soon as the pandemic hit, they accelerated it and they managed to achieve it in a 6-week period. And so you're now getting firms who've had a taste of, well, actually, this is how fast we can do things. And that is setting them up very nicely to speed up the pace of change, which in turn reduces the technical debt and gets them in as optimal a state as they possibly can.
So there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, the term technical debt, I think is fascinating. Secondly, I've heard Elon Musk talk about this, that if you need to clean your house in 30 days, it's going to take you 30 days. If you've got 3 days to do it, you'll do it in 3 days, and it can be sped up. And also for our listeners there, Brian said, get their SHIP, S-H-I-P, in order there, and he did not say anything that sounds like that because we don't want the podcast having an explicit label or being put upon it. He was getting the ship in order. So Ren, in the previous section, I talked about best career advice, and I asked you about best career advice. So I'm going to go to the other end of the spectrum now with worst. What's the worst advice or doctrine or mantra or manifesto that you see being dispensed in the accounting world at this time?
It's hard to say pick what the worst is. I think there are some conversations that people like us, vendors, have with accounting firms, and I often refer to them as perhaps an inch deep and a mile wide.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's all to do with sound bites. The shiny new thing that is there's going to be the silver bullet that'll solve all the problems. But there's also some conversations out there that I think suffer from a logical dissonance.
Okay.
And they are presented in almost a binary form. So one that I get stuck into is, for example, timesheets.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of books out there about whether timesheets as a method of billing is the right way to go. And I totally understand where people come from when they say that you should charge your clients for the value that you're delivering.
Yes.
Okay. And I absolutely get that, and I think that's right. But I think there's, in the binary form of this argument, there are some commentators out there that I don't think serve accounting firms correctly by suggesting that you throw out the timesheets and all you do is price according to that. And there's a lot of firms that have actually realised that doing that, they lose the art of measurement,
yes.
which impacts their organisation. But it's the thing that frustrates me about this conversation is it's an all conversation. You have timesheets or you don't, and I don't think it's that simple. And one of the things we've been working on with this new platform in Microsoft Teams is about enhancing those areas of measurement so that the firm is in a position where it can get accurate insights into its performance.
Mm-hmm.
That does aid the conversation around how we price,
mm-hmm.
but also around how we make ourselves more efficient,
mm-hmm.
how we make ourselves more effective, and how we look after the well-being of our team.
Yes.
Now, believe it or not, the art of measuring things by timesheets can actually, in today's world, actually help those firms do that, get those outcomes. But the very simplistic binary conversation that some commentators have about this drives me mad on that. And it's a little bit like the conversation around, and I've almost, well, I would say the word preaching to accountants, get out of compliance and get into advisory. I've got news for those people. Accountants have always been advisory.
Yep.
They have to decide what advisory looks like for them. So those sort of conversations, they've been going on and on and on for years. Some are very simplistic, and I get very frustrated at those ones that are very simplistic and are not presenting a well-formed conversation that has some depth and substance around it for firms. I don't think that serves them, and it doesn't serve the accounting firms.
Well, another word for evangelist is salesman or salesperson. In many cases. So that, we've got to be aware, and I think our listenership has got to be aware that when you see a message, it's generally in the interest of the person giving the message,
Yeah.
more than anything else. So, Brian, as we're sort of at the end of time here, we're going to go into the quick fire round to close us out today. Okay. So 3 questions for you in the quick fire round. The first one is this: what is the biggest thing that you're working on right now?
Well, the biggest thing we're working on now is the whole CloudCapcha platform, and that's delivering a new productivity and collaboration solution for leading accounting firms. The things that we're developing and doing are just very exciting, and to be doing that in the cloud for large to medium accounting firms is something that's absorbing every minute of my day at the moment. And so, yeah, that's our biggest thing right now.
Okay. Question 2 of 3. What excites you most about the accounting profession over the next 12 months?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying around the change that the pandemic has had on the way that firms are now making and approaching decisions around platforms for the future. And I think that they've had a taste of speed, and they've come to realise that actually they can execute things faster than they have done in years before. And I think that's just going to continue. We're going to find that as we come out of this pandemic phase, firms will start to look at, well, how can we organise our teams? How can we get them collaborating effectively, not just for themselves and their private lives, but also for the firm? And I just think that's going to continue to drive the pace of change that we're seeing at the moment.
Okay. And then final question. I know from looking into what you do, Brian, that a firm that wants to understand what you do and take what you do seriously needs to learn in stages, because, as you say, sometimes you get involved in very complex technical issues to drive practices forward. For firms listening to this, of which we have a large number, who want to take the first step to understanding CloudCapcha and exactly what it can do for the practice, where would you signpost them? Where do they begin their journey?
Straight to our website. So CloudCapcha, spelled cloud, CAPCHA.com. That's the best place to start. We've got some good material on there. We've got some case studies. Just drop us a line, and either myself or one of the team will be in touch, to start that conversation, and see how we can help.
And if they want to reach out to you directly, Brian, what's the best way of doing
If
that?
they want, LinkedIn is the best way for me. So Brian Coventry, all one word, is my LinkedIn handle, and that's the easiest way to get hold of me.
Brian, I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to be our expert interviewed this week. And I think what I take most of all from this is the everything with authenticity message, which I think will resonate across the board with our listenership. So, Brian Coventry, thank you very much for being our guest this week.
You've been watching or listening to the Accounting Influencers podcast, featuring hosts Rob Brown and Martin Bissett, with key interviews, what's working in the accounting profession, and news from the accounting and fintech world that helps you do your jobs better. We go out to 144 countries, over 20,000 unique listeners, with 100,000 downloads, and it is accredited for continued professional education and development. Thank you for tuning in.